This is Scott Richmond.
And Arnie Sherman.
You're listening to What Do You Know on Newstalk KGVO, AM 1290 and 1015 FM. All right, it's New Year's 2016. What do you know? Hey, Arnie.
Hey, Scott. How you doing? Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you, too.
I'm very excited. You know, we have now upgraded to Newstalk KGVO.
I'm loving it.
It's really exciting. I didn't realize now that I've come over here, the lavish upgrade, that we have here at KGVO. The sauna, the concierge I particularly like here. The old station was nice, but now moving in the new year over to the new station, the dressing rooms are terrific. The espresso machine I really like. And, I understand why Peter Christian's been here since the Vietnam War. I mean, he's been on this stage. He won't leave because of all the amenities.
He is the figurehead. Yeah, he is the man. It
really is terrific. And we're going to be starting off the new year with a really interesting guest. We're going to start off the new year with the always enlightening and straight-talking former governor of Montana, Brian.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that.
He's here to talk about his new book, Power Up, which talks about creating clean energy and jobs. And I know you've read the book, and so I
enjoyed it.
And you'll
learned a lot.
Questions, and then I think we'll move into some of the other issues that are, that Brian will have comments on: violence in America, ISIL in the Middle East. As you know, he lived in the Middle East for 6 or 7 years,
right?
After college, so he has a firsthand impression and experience of the mess that we find ourselves in the Middle East. And we'll also talk about the presidential race and what he thinks about the trumping of America and all of the other things that have been going on. So I think that'll be very enjoyable to our listeners who will stick around for a few more minutes at least.
Oh, I hope so.
And get a chance to listen to what Brian Schweitzer has to say. But first, I have a question for you.
Yes.
Okay. It's a new year, and the Oxford Dictionary for 2015 had the word of the year. Do you know what that word is?
It's not selfie. Is it selfie?
No, it's not selfie. That's a good guess. And it's not lumbersexual. Many of the people wander around the streets of Missoula looking like that. But it is not lumbersexual. But I'll give you a hint. The word of the year isn't a word.
It's a sound? What is it?
No, it's the emoji.
Oh.
Created in 1999 in Japan for cell phone use. That face with the tears of joy that are on it, and it's designed to express emotions. And, so it's the first time in history that the dictionary has a picture to describe a word. So in reality, I guess for the first time, a picture is worth 1,000 words, right? Because you open the dictionary, instead of a word to describe the word of the year, they have an actual picture. So I thought that was interesting as the word for 2015. A crazy year, in total, and lots of
emojis used.
Lots of emojis used by everyone. I don't even think 2 years ago anybody knew what an emoji was, and all of a sudden now it's part of our lexicon. But it reminds me of an interesting book talking about the Oxford Dictionary. There's a book that I read a while back called "The Professor and the Madman: A Tale of Murder, Insanity, and the Making of the Oxford Dictionary." It's written by a good writer, Simon Winchester. And I found it very fascinating. It's a story of the compilation of the Oxford Dictionary.
Right.
The English dictionary.
Right.
It wasn't until the mid-1850s that there was an effort to try to bring together all the words in the English language and have a definition for them. There's over 400,000 words. And so they put out a competition in the United Kingdom. And Cambridge University didn't want to do it. And Oxford took it on. It became a 50-year-plus project.
Okay.
And they didn't have the money to do it even. So they had a version of crowdsourcing. They actually put out, they nailed to trees around London and other places. They sent out in the mail requests for volunteers to help them come up with all the definitions of all the words in the English language. And there was this interesting fellow named Professor James Murray who was in charge of that. And one of the main contributors to this, who did over 10,000 of the words in the Oxford Dictionary.
Who was that?
It was a fellow who was a retired U.S. Army officer and Civil War surgeon, Dr. W.C. Minor. So Dr. Minor, for a long, long period of time, helped helped create and was the single main contributor. And after this long period of time in which Professor Murray had put the Oxford Dictionary together, he was retiring. I mean, 40 years, labor his whole life.
Okay.
And he decided to visit with Professor Murray and thank him for all of his help. And he found out later when he went to meet with Professor Miner that he was imprisoned in the Broadmoor Criminal Lunatic Asylum in England. And Broadmoor was the asylum that later became known as Bedlam. So in the word Bedlam, that comes from being from this institution. And he had gone crazy in the United States. His family was wealthy. They had sent him to the United Kingdom. In the United Kingdom, he had murdered someone. And when they brought him to trial, they decided that he was insane. I guess the diagnosed in this era as paranoid schizophrenic.
The insanity plea.
And they put him in the institution. And this guy from a cell, not from an office, he was a doctor. He wasn't working there.
Right.
He was living there. He was the single largest contributor to the Oxford Dictionary. I thought that was an interesting segue.
What a good use of my time.
Yeah, really. I'm going to go thank the person that really helped me do my job, and the guy's in a mental institution.
I wonder if our incarcerated could be as productive.
Yeah. Well, this guy certainly was. And so, we have the opportunity now to move from talking about the Oxford Dictionary and the book about that to a book that you read that Brian Schweitzer has written. Mm-hmm. It's got a very interesting title. We're going to ask him about it. It's Power Up Energy, How the Coming Revolution Will Empower You, Free Us All from All Oil Wars, and Make You a Buck or Two. It's a pretty long name.
How many books has he written?
Including that one?
Yes.
One.
Is that right?
Yes.
But with the incredible amount of information that he shares with us in this book, a real education.
He's a soil scientist by training before he was governor, and he took a great interest in the energy because, as you know, Montana is an energy state.
Right.
Has a third of America's coal and a lot of wind power and a lot of oil and gas and other natural resources, and he took a very personal interest in all of that, and he's very astute observer of the whole industry and sector.
Yeah, what an interesting book, and quite frankly, his upbringing and as a kid growing up on a ranch where you were completely energy dependent, and how they his father, right, and his grandfather, how they made do before there was energy actually going to the ranch, and how they did it themselves. I think it's an interesting story.
Interesting story, interesting book. We'll talk to him about the book, and then hopefully we'll be able to get into some of the other contemporary events that are going on that I'm sure he will.
Right at the heart of it.
Sure. So let's give Brian a call and see what he has to say.
All right, great. Well, right after this, we'll be back with Governor Brian Schweitzer on What Do You Know? Welcome to What Do You Know, Governor Schweitzer.
And Happy New Year. Hopefully 2015 was a good year for you, and we're all looking forward to 2016. A lot going on.
2016 is going to be a great year, but of course I've been accused of being an optimist in the past.
Well, there was good reason to be optimistic during your 8 years here as governor.
We had some good years, but in politics, a lot of it is luck and timing. There's a little skill involved, but most of it's luck and timing.
Wow. You had good luck and good timing and a lot of skill.
Well, thank you.
That's just from a voter and a Montanan. Well, I want to talk a little bit about your book. How'd you come up with the name Power Up Energy, How the Coming Revolution Will Empower You, Make Us All, free us all from oil wars and make you a buck or two? I can't even say it without skipping over. Where'd the name originate from?
Well, actually, the name came after I wrote the book. And I have had a passion about energy since I was a boy. I grew up on the prairie of Montana knowing that all of that land, all of those farmhouses, all of those small towns, all across eastern Montana and the Dakotas and Nebraska, they were all electrified before any utility brought any wires there. They all had harnessed the wind as early as 1920, 1925. The Jacobs brothers from Vida, Montana, are the oldest renewable energy company in America. By 1930, they had shipped wind chargers all over the world. They had electrified all of the rural areas across the Great Plains and across the world. And I guess we thought we had made some great progress when we implemented FDR's rural electrification, because now these farms got to have a copper wire instead of having their own electricity with wind and batteries. So I've thought about these things over the years. Why we've attached ourselves to the Saudi oil family so that Chevron, which was Standard Oil of California earlier, could get the exclusive oil rights. And for 60 years, and many people in Montana and beyond said, I got my master's degree, and my posting was in Libya. So I was in Libya first. I'm an agricultural scientist and irrigation specialist. And then I went to Saudi Arabia for 7 years, learned to speak Arabic. So before a lot of America thought too much about the Middle East, all the way back to the 80s, I learned a lot about what was going on. And it confounded me that America had built such a strong alliance with the Saudi royal family. Now, the Saudi royal family is the most corrupt, immoral, anti-Christian, anti-Jewish, anti-American, anti-democracy regime on the planet. They're not respected by their own people. They seize power by the sword. They're not respected by their neighbors because they are corrupt. And their neighbors, who are also Sunni Muslims for the most part, they look at America and say, how can you be the protector? And we have been. We've had our military in Saudi Arabia since the 1950s propping them up. Why?
Right.
Because an oil company had the exclusive rights to their oil. Now, I suppose it made sense when we needed their oil, but we are on the precipice of being a net exporter of energy. Not just because of our hydrocarbons and fracking and technology, but because of conservation. We use less energy. And now, this advent, it is a game changer of electric cars. 30 years from now, we're going to look back and say, my God, why did it take so long? Because in my book, Power Up About Energy, I explained that in 1910, there were 30-plus manufacturers of electric cars in the United States, that 50% of the cars in America were electric, led by the Detroit Automobile Company. Get this. In 1910, the Detroit Automobile Company guaranteed you could get 100 miles on a charge when you drove their car off the lot in 1910. Well, let's fast forward to today. There are actually two cars out of the 30-some that are made in around the world that will guarantee that you can get 100 miles on a charge. The Toyota RAV, and of course the Tesla. What the heck happened? In over 100 years, we have not advanced battery technology very far. Well, the answer to the question is oil was cheap. That was number one. And of course, the other one was that as long as oil was cheap and plentiful, and as long as it was inexpensive to prop up these regimes in the Middle East,
right?
Well, it made sense.
So we
but
took
how
our.
does
So
it make sense today to prop up these? How does it make sense for us to be in wars in the Middle East when we can lead, and we do lead in technology of developing new energies that are not attached to anything?
Well, Governor, question for you. So we took our eye off the ball for 100 years, right? So we lost there. We made no progress with electric cars and batteries. And then secondly, we got into a bunch of useless wars, right?
Correct.
Why?
Well, it's money. The military-industrial complex, they make money because, well, as Eisenhower, a very good Republican, and the general, as you might remember, he warned us when he left office that the military-industrial complex will try to engage America in a series of small wars with the hope and the expectation that some of them will grow to larger wars.
Right.
Boycotted he. I mean, so then we went right to Korea and Vietnam, of course, and followed up with a few more little wars. But now, by God, we have a multi-country war going on in the Middle East. In fact, we have now been in Afghanistan longer. The United States, our military, has been at war in Afghanistan longer than, get this, the Civil War, World War I, and World War II combined. And nobody can tell you accurately, why the heck did we go to Afghanistan to begin with? They have no oil. They have no gold. They have no pipelines. They're not even on the way between two places, but they're in the Middle East.
I think I think it's interesting. I think people need to hear this because what's interesting is you talk about our oil dependencies and you talk about like the peak in 2005, 61% of the oil that we imported, the oil that we had was imported in 2005, and we've cut that in half. But what I think is,
and we're on our way to zero. In fact, when we went to war in Iraq, only 13% of the oil we consumed in America came from the entire Middle East. And since transportation fuel is only 30% of the total energy that we use, it was something like 3 or 4% of our total energy came from the Middle East, and that was enough for us to go to war.
Crazy.
But why did we go to war? Well, we went to war because we wanted to continue to be oil brokers. It wasn't that we were necessarily consumers. But if we could refine it, if we could ship it, if we could develop it, in fact, if we could get the sole concession in Iraq like Chevron already had in Saudi Arabia, well, it was good for corporate America. But it cost a lot of lives.
Well, it certainly did. And I remember...
And we destabilized the Middle East. People ask me, Brian, you spent almost a decade in the Middle East. You learned to speak Arabic. What the heck is going on there? There's Sunnis, there's Shias, there's Persians, they can't figure it all out. They say, who are the good guys, who are the bad guys? Let me narrow it down for you. No good guys, all bad guys, and some of them are allies.
And they're not always your allies. Sometimes they're your allies, and then they're not your allies.
On the same day.
Yeah, on the same day.
So the point here is that do we really care whether the Sunnis or the Shias control the oil in the Middle East if we don't need it? Do we care whether the Persians or the Arabs control the oil in the Middle East if we don't need it? No, we don't. In fact, now that we are oil exporters, now that Congress has just reversed the ban on exporting oil from the United States for the last 40 years, they are our direct competition. In fact, we probably gain if they blow up and they have a war going on, 5 countries involved in the Middle East, and we don't know for sure whether the Sunnis, the Shias, the Persians, or Arabs can control the oil. Who cares? If they can't ship the oil, good for us. Not only good because we're oil and gas producers in the United States, nearly the largest in the world. Not only that we have those hydrocarbons, but we are leading the world in alternative energy. In battery technology, nobody touches us. We are leading the world, and that's where the game change is going to come. We have an unlimited supply of energy. Energy, wind and sun and hydrocarbons. But
Brian, did we not know? When we fully engaged in the Middle East militarily, did we not understand our natural resource capability, or did we just ignore it?
A little of both. It's a little of both. And frankly, this latest oil explosion is around fracking. Oil and gas development in the United States, in particular, is because of developments in fracking during the last 10 years. Now, some environmentalists have it wrong. They say that this fracking technology is new technology. It isn't. Fracking was first used, as I say in my book, in 1867. And by 1930, there had been 2 million wells fracked in the United States alone. So it's not that it's new technology. It's that they found some new kinds of fracturing that allowed us to markedly increase the production from shale. Normally, you get it from sandstone or even limestone, but the tar shale, by fracturing it and forcing sand into it with horizontal drilling, it was a game changer starting in the Bakken about 10 years ago. But beyond that, we didn't leave the Stone Age because we ran out of rock. We didn't leave the Bronze Age because we were out of bronze. And when we leave the hydrocarbon era, there will be a lot of oil, a lot of gas, and a lot of coal in the ground. We'll leave it because we'll have a cheaper, cleaner way of producing and storing energy. Right now, 90% of the homes in America can produce electricity on their rooftop cheaper than they can buy it from the utility. And that is just about every house in America. I'll say it again. You can produce your electricity cheaper than you can buy it from your utility.
So why aren't we doing it? Why aren't we doing it?
So
well, because as I explained in the book, the price of solar power has decreased from $80 a watt and to 80 cents a watt, and I have installed one for less than that. Solar panels I bought for 53 cents a watt. So it is markedly dropped in price and will continue to drop in price. But here's the limiting factor. You need your utility as a battery. The sun doesn't always shine. It doesn't shine at night. And the batteries have, imperfect at best. But during the last 15 years, this marked drop in the price and quality of solar panels has already happened with batteries and will continue to drop. Right now, you can cut the wire with your utility, and you can in batteries, and you can run your house on solar, and you'll never need. I have a cabin here in Montana that is not hooked to the grid at all. And you don't even miss it. We finally reached the precipice where the price energy that you could produce at home is cheaper than you could buy your utility. And incidentally, now with the advent of electric cars, you'll buy the car and the battery, your home battery. When it's parked in your garage, you just use that electricity that's left over. And the brave new world of energy is when we get what time of use metering, which is available in countries around the world, in Canada, New Zealand, all over Europe. And it's available in about 50% of the utilities in America. Not available in Montana, but what time of use metering does makes us more efficient consumers.
So you talk about the concept of every citizen becoming an individual energy entrepreneur. And this is what you're basically saying, is that their cars and the batteries in their cars enable them to be such. And that
you have got to price electricity at its real value. You see, Northwestern Energy says they need a rate increase. They need a rate increase because they say, well, we're using more electricity. We'll use more electricity 20 years from now than we're using today. So therefore, we have to build more peaking plants so that we can generate electricity as it goes up. In the middle of the night, we don't need much electricity, and the value of electricity is pretty cheap. And so that's what's called base load. You build enough electrical generation capacity so that you can produce, at minimum, the amount that you need. And then you have a series of other generators that you ramp up until you get to that very day on the 15th of July, middle of the day, where you need every bit of generation that you've got. And the last generation that you produce costs 3 times as much to produce and deliver as the first. But in Montana, Northwestern Energy sells it to you all the same. All over the world, the time of use metering, a consumer's a lot smarter. They say, well, I'm not going to run my dishwasher during the day, and I'm not going to run my dryer in the middle of the day. I'm going to do it in the middle of the night.
Right.
Well,
it's cheaper.
And you had a car. Imagine this scenario. You buy your electricity when it's cheaper. You sell it when it's more expensive. You put it. You have solar panels on your roof, and you fill the battery in your car. You drive it to work. You get in the middle of the day, and electricity is a lot of money. Your car automatically pulls some electricity back into for 3 times what you paid for it. Makes the payment on the
sell
car.
It back.
Solar panels, and voila, we are less dependent on new energy production. It's cheaper. It's better for America, and we never fight another oil war.
So what? So quickly, let me stop you for a second. So what have we learned here, right? So here's the deal: we no longer need to be dependent on big oil. We don't need longer to be getting into all these wars to fight for oil that we don't even use. We ourselves can start producing all the energy. Our car batteries, as the technology gets more sophisticated and allows us to do so, we become individual energy brokers, right?
Exactly.
Individual
You're
energy
buying
brokers.
and selling electricity 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
Right. And this is, you think about this, right? You think about there's an app for that. This is like the Uber of energy, right? The supply and demand. It's more expensive.
No question about it. And all of the apps that will be created around energy conservation and the ability of buying and selling and storing is going to be explosive. It's going to be as big as the Internet was because, frankly, there's more money in energy than there is in communication.
So what are the oil companies going to do while this is going on? They're going to sit around and wave flags and be cheerleaders?
No, not at all. The oil companies are going to be in business for some period of time. I think that it could be 30 years from now, we could be driving 50% electric cars or fuel cell cars. All right, but still, that's 50%, and we're going to double the number of cars on the planet during the next 30 years. We just are, because people in the third world are going to enter the middle class and they're going to buy them. So oil's going to be just fine. They're going to do okay. They're not crazy about this innovation, but there's not a hell of a lot they can do about it, except one thing. I've heard people in big energy say, why do we give all these subsidies to solar and wind? I thought, when you put a solar panel on your roof, you can write 30% of the cost of that solar panel off the very first year. Well, that's not fair. If solar can't make it on its own, we shouldn't subsidize it. So I'd ask you, let's see, you've got a few days until, if you wanted to drill an oil well, how much can you write off in the first year? 100%, not 50% like solar, 100%. Now, I've asked for my oil business, well, you're critical of these quote, subsidies for solar because you can write 30% of the cost of the tax off on the first year. You say, well, if you can't make it on your own, it should be a business. Well, you can write 100% off. Why is that? Well, they say, oh, you don't understand. Like, well, school me a little bit. They say, well, it's a risky business. Well, it's risky. Let's say sometimes we'll spend the money and we don't get any oil. Oh, so it's a risky business. And so you want me, the taxpayer, to share in your when it's dry hole so you can get rich on the ones that are wet. It seems to me that solar, which is 100%, before you put your solar panels up, how much electricity you're going to produce for the next 30 years. I think that's a better bet than us betting on oil. What do you think?
Sure. So let me ask you this. How is the book being received? What kind of feedback are you getting?
Well, it's tough to argue with it. And frankly, I lay a lot of things out about energy. In fact, I tell people, the environmental community, I kind of wag my finger at them. You mean you spent 8 years and $100 million citing one pipeline called Keystone when there's already 20 pipelines across the border from Canada? There's 160,000 miles of pipelines that crisscross this country. You thought because you were going to stop one pipeline, you were going to stop all the oil development in Alberta, and we were going to quickly move to solar and wind? That's as silly as the conservatives who claim that there's no such thing as climate change. Listen to yourself. You're as anti-science as all these Republicans that are running for president. And then I also explain the dangers in oil and gas drilling, what fracking is, what fracking isn't, and explain how they've been a little anti-science in that area too. But in this book, I do explain how solar and wind and battery technology are fundamentally going to change the world. Not just in the first world where we'll develop this technology, not just in America where we will own battery technology in the same way that we own space travel and the internet. We will own battery technology, will fundamentally change the entire world and put America for the next 100 years to be in charge of how we make and use energy worldwide.
Right. So has your friend Harold Hamm at Continental had any comments about this so far?
Well, Harold Hamm does not disagree. In fact, Harold Hamm has never drilled an oil or gas well outside the United States. He's just like T. Boone Pickens, who I also mentioned in the book. They believe that to have energy security, you've got to produce the energy in America. I don't disagree with that. I in fact, produce oil and gas in the United States. We still need oil and gas until we move to the next energy supply. What I don't like is for us to use our military to prop up the Middle East regimes, the most corrupt, immoral, anti-Christian, anti-Jewish, anti-woman, anti-democracy regimes on the planet with our blood and our money. It doesn't make any sense. Let them boil on their own oil, and we'll develop our energy in America. It'll be cleaner and greener.
I have a question. So it's hard to think that big oil is going to get out of the energy game. They're going to be like the middlemen, right? As part of the brokerage as people broker energy, they're going to be right in there, kind of dictating.
Well, slow down. I want to say this thing again that I said earlier. 70% of the energy in America is non-transportation fuel.
Right.
Only 30% of the energy is transportation fuel. So if we shift a small part of our natural gas and electricity to transportation fuel, then we are taking the place of imported oil. So oil is only one part of the energy equation in the United States. Most of the energy equation in America is actually electricity and natural gas. And by the way, in the United States, we have 250,000 natural gas cars. Argentina and Brazil, 2 million each. There's 4 million in China. There's 3 million in Iran. There's 1 million in Pakistan. America is the number one producer of natural gas. We have the most sophisticated distribution system of natural gas on the planet. Natural gas is still, even with the drop in oil prices, still cheaper to run than oil or in your car. And yet, we only have 250,000. What the heck is going on? If we really believe in making America energy independent, we ought to be investing full speed in natural gas, fuel cells, solar panels, and batteries. That's the future of America.
Sure.
The next generation will be richer, not only because we won't go to war, but because we'll sell our technology.
Well, all of our listeners certainly should have been motivated to pick up your book, Power Up Energy.
The name of the book is PowerUp.Energy. PowerUp.Energy. And frankly, you can buy it at Amazon.com. You can, if you read the electronic version. But this was published in Montana by the Phillipsburg Mail. So you can buy the book from the Phillipsburg Mail right there on Main Street of Phillipsburg, Montana, because that's the future of this country. I couldn't write a book talking about how we're going to change the world and then let some New York publisher on the 14th on 52nd
I understand that.
Hey, can I ask, before we leave the book for a second, quick question. With respect to advancements in technology around vehicles, battery-powered vehicles and hybrid vehicles, is there going to be a little bit of are we going to start seeing the Teslaization of, all the major manufacturers start to kick into high gear? Or are we going to
Absolutely.
Hanging where we are right now? Tell me.
We already have Mercedes, BMW, Chevrolet, Ford, Toyota, Nissan. They all have electric cars, and they are all in with electric cars.
But are they going to get more than 200? Are they
fuel cell or electric?
Are they going to get more than 200? What'd you say? 275. Your book is
absolutely.
This book is a great.
The Tesla gets about 250 miles on a charge, but it also goes from 0 to 60 in 2.9 seconds today. That's the newest Tesla.
Incredible.
Corvette's about 6 seconds. So they're very efficient cars, and the battery technology is doubling in quality and decreasing in price by 50% every 5 years.
Yep.
Plug that in and figure out where we're going to be 15 years from now. The batteries will be 3 times as large and will cost 1/3.
So the name of the book is PowerUp.Energy, How the Coming Revolution Will Empower You, Free Us All from Oil Wars, and Make You a Buck or Two. It's a great piece. It's an education, right? Read it.
My passion is energy. This isn't about politics. I'm a scientist first and foremost. I have a passion about energy. I've traveled the world to learn about energy. And in this book, I explain how I went to Israel to see a recharging station. I've been all over the Middle East and Latin America to learn more about energy. I've been to fracking wells. This has been a lifetime of learning about energy as it stands today and where energy is going, and that's what this book is, PowerUp.Energy.
Terrific. Governor, I'm going to switch gears on you for a moment. You're a gun owner. I'm a gun owner. I remember once during one of your campaigns, they asked you about gun ownership, and you said you had more guns than you need, but not as many as you wanted. So I want to talk to you about violence in America without using all the buzzwords, because once you get into all the buzzwords, right-wing extremists or whatever, you just get polarization. We have a problem with violence in America. We have over 300 million guns in America. What do we do about it? Putting your governor hat, you're back in a policy role. What do we do about violence in America? Is there some solution? Is there some direction we ought to be moving?
I've been in 51 countries around the world, and it's difficult for me to download that we are probably the most violent society on the planet that is heavily armed. And again, listen, rural places like Montana, and Bernie Sanders made this point in one of the debates where both Martin OMalley and Hillary were beating up on him. He said, look, every state in America is not the same. I don't know why you need to have 3 guns if you live in an apartment building on the 16th floor in Philadelphia. But if you live like I do on a mountaintop at the end of a dirt road, hell yeah, I got a shotgun, I got a 22, I got a 30-06, I got a 270, I hunt, and, sometimes I'm going to need that to defend myself, probably not from somebody walking, but, maybe a critter breaking in or something. But I can say this. This is outrageous that Congress can't even stop the gun show exception. I mean, everybody who is a criminal that is not allowed to buy a gun knows that they can just go to a gun show, pay in cash, there's no paperwork, or they can buy it online. And now the suggestion was, you know what, if you're on the no-fly list, if you're considered, a terrorist threat, and we're not allowing you to get on an airplane, we're not going to let you buy a gun. And we can't even get Congress to agree with that.
I know.
There's some common sense things we can do, folks. But frankly, this is something you need to know about the NRA. I was a member of the NRA, and I assumed that the NRA paid their way because all of us dues-paying members, I don't know, you pay your $10 or your $15, and that was enough money for them to be advocates of private gun ownership. Then I got to scratch my head and did a little math, and I see all of the lobbying efforts and all the money that they get. And my gosh, that's 100 times more than the dues that they get. So I figured it out. Oh my gosh. So you got a couple of dozen gun and ammunition manufacturers that fund the whole damn thing. And I have a cousin who was for 24 years in a row, first cousin, who was the largest gun salesman in Montana. And one time we were at a family reunion, and he said, "You know, Brian, I tell you, since Obama got elected the last 2 years, I sold more guns and ammo than I did the whole time we had a Republican there, and I haven't had as good a gun sale since Clinton was president." He said, "Maybe I ought to vote for a Democrat." Then he laughed and said, "Oh, it's probably not going to happen." But the point is that when they have a Democrat in the White House, oh my God, they tell everybody they're going to take away your guns. And there's no legislation that's been put out there. There's nothing going to pass. But right now, try and go out and buy some shells, some 22 shells, for example. My gosh, you're on a waiting list because everybody is filling their basement with ammunition because they're absolutely sure that a bunch of thugs in tanks and Humvees are going to show up at your house, take your guns and all your ammo.
Yeah, well, as we all know, that's not going to happen. Let me ask you this. You mentioned, Hillary and Martin OMalley beating up on Bernie. You endorse Martin OMalley. Tell me your thinking behind that.
Martin OMalley's a smart guy, and he and I were governors together, and I watched how he ran Maryland, and, they made more progress in education than any other state in the union. We were pretty proud of what we had done here. Martin was, before he was a mayor, before he was a governor, he was a mayor. He's actually run things before. He's actually balanced budgets before. And he's he's a new generation. Honest to God, we have a whole country full of talented people, and yet just about everybody who is likely to be elected president is in their 60s or beyond. It's time for a lot of energy in the White House. We got a lot of things that we need to fix. Martin's a smart guy, and I think he'd be a good president. Now, he's running about 2% in the polls. He's probably not going to be president, but I have a lot of respect for him. So just because somebody's not likely to be the winner isn't going to be my decision on who I'm going to support.
Well, that's good to know, and that's smart.
That makes sense.
It makes a lot of sense. So tell me about the Trumping of America. Not so much what Trump says, because it's all designed to incite and inflame. But why is it getting so much traction among party members in the Republican Party?
Well, I'll go with George Lopez on this, the comedian. George Lopez was talking about Trump, and he said, George Lopez said that Trump, he's anti-immigrant, especially he hates Hispanics, but he doesn't really want any immigrants. He's trying to stop all immigration. And but Trump has proved one thing. He's right about one thing. Since 2 out of 3 of his wives were immigrants, he's proved this. There are some jobs that Americans just won't do.
At least 2 out of 3 Americans.
He's a demagogue. And this is sort of in the entertainment section of politics. But one thing that Trump has scratched, there is an itch. And this sort of familiarity has bred contempt of some politicians. And you watch some of these politicians, and you get to thinking, hell, they're not that damn smart. And you look at Marco Rubio, he's never run anything. Ted Cruz has been in the Senate just for a couple of years, never been in charge of anything, and he's maybe going to be president. And Trump is making fun of all of them because he says, look, they've never run anything. What makes them so smart? And they say, well, you have policy proposals like, not allowing any Muslims into the country or, some of the other things he's proposed. They call it ridiculous. Well, yeah, it's ridiculous, but not nearly as ridiculous as the Republicans who say we're going to scrap our entire tax program and we're going to go to a flat tax or something. Meanwhile, all of corporate America, who are their benefactors, have got themselves carved out. They're not going to change the tax code. They have no chance of doing that. That's just as ridiculous. Or carpet bombing. I don't even know what that means anymore, but apparently Ted Cruz says we're going to carpet bomb entire cities in the Middle East, which How when only 5% of the people in that area are combatants against us, would you want to kill 95% of the people there? It's just silly. But so he's just as silly as Trump.
Right,
but people are kind of entertained by Trump.
Well, but it does resonate. One of the surprising things that I heard, I was watching a focus group, and there was a gentleman in a suit and tie, and he was fairly articulate, and he said, Trump says what we all really believe. And that was shocking to me because we don't all really believe what he says.
No.
But there is a section of the population who think that this really is what America stands for.
Well, you'll find some people that really believe that. Go down and sit at a bar someplace in Missoula, or go down to the Bitterroot, or go on up to the Flathead, or any place else in Montana. Sit up at the bar stool, sit next to a fellow with his, a third day with the same pair of jeans. I'm not complaining about that. I do plenty of that myself. And get talking about things, and you'll have some notions, and those notions will sound a lot like what Trump is saying.
Governor,
but you know what? Here's how in politics you always win. Ask questions.
Right.
When somebody says something's ridiculous, come back and say, well, now, how would that apply to this? And how could you possibly do it on this circumstance? And what if this were to occur? To wave your right hand from left to right and say everything is encompassed in just what I said, no, it's not.
No.
It is much more nuanced than that. But what Trump does sound like, he does sound racist. I don't know if he's racist. And what Hillary said the other day was probably incorrect. I don't know ISIS is doing anything with their videos, and I don't actually care. Because people in America are concerned that this ISIS is going to show up on their front doorstep with a knife and cut their head off. These people don't even have the ability to get to the United States. The notion that these people could frontally attack the United States is silly. The only reason that they're using terrorism is because they have the most powerful military in the history of the world standing on their main streets. They can't possibly go toe-to-toe with the United States. So the only way they can fight that battle is through terrorism. And if we got the hell out of the Middle East, then the Sunnis and Shias could decide who controls the oil. And do we really care who's in charge of Mecca and Medina? No. We don't.
So getting back to that point, what is, you're in a policy role. President of the United States turns to you and says, Governor Schweitzer, what do we do about ISIL right now? What do you say to him?
Well, here's what I say, first off, we say to the Arab world, we are no longer the protectors of the Saudi royal family. They'll have to protect themselves. And so if the Saudis and Equatis, if they won't send ground troops into Syria and Iraq to defend their own homeland, why should we? There's 30 million people live in Saudi Arabia. And by the way, when we talk about the Syrian refugees, 95% of the Syrian refugees are Sunni Muslims. And to get from Syria to the United States is 10,000 miles. To get from Syria to Saudi Arabia is 100 miles.
Right.
And Saudi Arabia is the size, just so you have it in context, Saudi Arabia is the size of Washington, Oregon, California, Arizona, New Mexico, Nevada, Idaho, and Utah. And they got 30 million people. Well, that same most unoccupied part of the United States has 68 million. It's nearly empty. So why don't they set up refugee camps? 100 miles, bring them in. And by the way, there is a civil war in Syria because of the Saudi royal family. When King Abdulaziz, the first Saudi king, on his deathbed, he turned to his brothers and sons and he said, keep your eye on Syria. Don't allow them to spread. And you know what he didn't like about Syria? It's because Syria and the Assads, who are brutal dictators, just like the Saudi royal family, they're secular. They are not run by Sharia law. They allow Christians and Jews and Sunnis and Shias and anybody else who wants to live there and pray, they let them. In Saudi Arabia, it is against the law to have a Christian service. If you visited, when I was in Saudi Arabia, if you ever visited Israel and you had an Israeli stamp in your passport, you were never allowed Saudi Arabia again.
So how do you really feel about the Saudis?
I mean, the point is, it's disgusting for me that we're concerning ourselves with ISIS because they chop people's heads off, while the Saudi royal family, on an annual basis, average about 400 per year.
Right.
And they chop them off Mostly after a short, I will call it a trial, but it's Sharia law, so it's just a couple of matawas.
Well, why do we think we need them?
Well, we did need them in the past because Chevron was making a lot of money over there, and we were importing a lot of oil. I mean, when we peaked during the George W. Bush era, where we were importing 61% of our oil.
Right.
Well, we are now directly competing against them. Why should we problem?
Right. It makes no sense. Hey, let's wrap it up. I want to ask you a question. How do you see the field shaking out? If you take Trump out of the Republican kind of conversation, if that does happen, who do you see as kind of emerging to the top of the heap?
A few months ago, I said it was going to be Rubio, and I said it because he's a younger, newer generation. He speaks Spanish fluently. Now, he's not. Most Hispanics wouldn't consider him Hispanic because he's Cuban, but he speaks Spanish fluently. He's the son of two immigrants, and he's younger than all the people in the field. And he wasn't, he's conservative, but not crazy conservative. And so I discounted Cruz. Here's what's happening right now. Carson's collapsing. Cruz is grabbing all the evangelical vote. Cruz is rocketing up. Cruz is likely to win throughout the South. As people drop out, and there are fewer and fewer people in the race that are traditional Republicans, they're going to gravitate to Cruz. I'm telling you right now, Cruz is likely to be the Republican nominee.
Frightening. That's my own personal politics.
So you see it shaping up as Hillary Cruz.
Hillary Cruz.
Well, that'll be interesting. Brian, it's always informative and interesting, and time goes fast. Can we ask you to come on again sometime and continue this conversation?
Absolutely, and support the Phillipsburg Mail in Phillipsburg, Montana. Give them a call. They'll send you a book. It's called PowerUp.Energy, and I promise you this: when you get done, there will have been a dozen times that you will have done the thing that Johnny Carson and Ed McMahon used to do. They would say, "I did not know that." So you're going to learn a lot about energy because I spent a year researching this book.
What do you know? Well, we want to thank Governor Brian Schweitzer, who was our guest today, and buy his book PowerUp.Energy, and we'll see you next week on What Do You Know?
Thank you, Brian.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Take care.
Thank you for listening to What Do You Know?
I can't wait for the next show, Scott.
I'm excited too, Arnie. If you'd like to suggest a guest, send me an email at scottrichmond@townsquaremedia.com. We'll see you next week. And thanks for listening to Newstalk KGVO, AM 1290, 101.5 FM, and newstalkkgvo.com.